They handed my sister the rehearsal bouquet like a coronation, petals arranged with that exact careless generosity reserved for the favored child, and the room, for a handful of bright seconds, decided which of us belonged inside the story and which of us lived on the margins. My name is Aria. I'm 33, and for most of my life I made small, steady things. A neighborhood daycare that doubled as a literacy center, a volunteer kitchen that fed college kids during exam weeks, the kind of projects that do not look like movements until someone counts the quiet ways they save people. My parents liked to tell stories about how I always preferred to fix a leaky roof rather than complain about the rain. It was true. I loved fixing things. I also believed family would be the shelter that kept me dry. The rehearsal dinner should have been a soft thing. Wine, a few toasts, the easy hum of relatives completing each other's sentences. Instead, Elena, my sister, chose the night to finish a slow erasure that had begun years ago with offhand comments and phantom favors. She had the room in her pocket, cousins who learned to echo her laughter, a mother who blinked too politely, and a string of old friends who nodded like metronomes at precisely the right moment. When the MC asked for a light-hearted family anecdote, Elena's story was a funny little anecdote about me. Not cruel on the surface, but with a tilt. Aria always thought grand gestures mattered more than financial stability. Bless her heart. People laughed. I felt my chin shrink. The guardrail for humiliation is usually embarrassment, and then, if you're lucky, it's over. That night humiliation was meant to mark me. After dessert, a cousin, too loud, too quick to please, asked if I'd finally stopped charity theater and learned to run something that made money. The laughter was a tide. I left without a scene, because I had learned that scenes leave rubble and my staff relied on my hands to bake the next morning. Walking home in a cold drizzle, I felt every small sting. The way Elena's eyes had slid from me to the bouquet she'd been handed and back again. The way Dad had cleared his throat as if to apologize and found the words stuck behind sugar. I could have posted a long grief online. I could have called everyone out and let social fury do the work of accountability. But the bakery had payroll to meet and a pantry that fed single parents on Fridays. I wasn't interested in spectacle. I wanted justice that repaired. So I did the thing I always did first. I counted. I inventoried what we had and what we might lose if I simply exploded. I checked the books, because numbers are stubborn and tell truths that gossip cannot spin. That night at the kitchen table, under a lamp that hummed like a patient machine, I pulled invoices and donation receipts, cross-checked grant paperwork and email threads between the foundation Elena chaired and several donors. A pattern showed itself like a stain revealed. Funds earmarked for community programs had been queued and rerouted to a newly created family fund, a line item in the foundation ledger that did not correspond to any public project. The signatures were in Elena's hand. Anger is fashionable for 2 minutes. Planning keeps you safe for the months after. I made 3 decisions that week. Evidence, allies, and timing. Evidence because a ledger with dates and numbers is harder to wave away than a hurt voice. Allies because I could not do this without people who were both competent and discreet. Timing because the reveal must land where it cannot be easily dismissed as private drama. My friend Layla, who ran the legal clinic at the university and had the kind of memory that remembers names like they are facts on a map, agreed to look over the documents. She did not gasp. She read. "This is housekeeping errors or its intent," she said. "We'll find out." Marta, my head baker and the one person who had never once treated the bake sale as theater, offered to keep the shop afloat if I needed to speak. The only weakness in our plan was fear, not of losing, but of what would happen to the families who depended on us should the foundation's revolving loans suddenly stop. We moved slowly. I met with Layla in a corner of the clinic, handed her printed threads, and watched how she catalogued things with an engineer's eye. She found transfers labeled reserve allocation that coincided with dates when grant disbursements were supposed to be made to our literacy program. The paper trail bent toward one account that listed Elena's initials as a cosigner. We quietly corroborated with a third party, a treasurer from another small nonprofit who'd noticed similar misallocations in passing. Facts are not always glorious. They are patient. The timing we chose surprised even me. The town's annual charitable luncheon was 3 weeks away. Elena would be there, flanked by the same donors who clapped for her rehearsal anecdote. The luncheon attracts press, trustees, and, according to local gossip, one or two patrons with deep pockets and even deeper curiosity about the people whose work actually anchored the neighborhood. I didn't want a spectacle. I wanted a setting where scrutiny had to be professional and where donors would be forced to look at the public record. On the morning of the luncheon, I felt like a woman who had folded herself into armor. Marta covered the bakery for me. Layla and I met the auditor we'd convinced to review the files, a woman named Priya, fierce and gentle, who liked numbers the way gardeners like soil. Priya confirmed what we feared. The reserve entries were not earmarked. They were unaccounted for in public reporting. They matched transfers that never became projects. Her report, clean and annotated, fit into a folder like a blade. At the luncheon, Elena stood in a dress that made her look as if she had always been meant for praise. She shook hands, told donors about strategic consolidation, and spoke of transparency while arranging her smile like a shield. When the Q&A opened, I felt my throat pull like a tide. When a reporter asked about accountability, the room instead moved into generalities. The press is often bored by small thefts. They need drama and spectacle. We had to make ours impossible to ignore. I waited for the trustee who had once visited our literacy class, an elderly man who cried during poetry readings and carried a reputation for taking practical action when he cared. I found him near the buffet and asked if he had 5 minutes. He laughed and said he had all day. I asked quietly if he'd look at one document with the auditor. He did. When the room took a breath between speeches, Priya began to speak in a voice that asked for hearing rather than attention. She laid out dates and transfers. She slid copies to the press rep and to trustees. I read, softly because anger is loud and facts cannot be shouted into meaning. The sums, the missing projects, the co-signed notes. Elena's face changed color the way paper does when you press water into it. She tried the first defense, mislabeling. Then the second, miscommunication. We had responses already prepared. Layla read a line from a donor email confirming an expectation of project funding. The trustee cleared his throat and, in a voice less kind than the one he used for poems, asked for a public accounting. The room, which had been warm with applause minutes before, went cool. Cameras leaned. Elena's supporters found their smiles awkwardly thin. At that precise moment, a man moved through the crowd with a cane and an air that the room recognized. Camden Whitaker, a businessman known for holding small-town lunches in one hand and quietly underwriting practical solutions in the other. He had never sponsored the gala. He came when he pleased. He had, rumor said, a weakness for integrity and community grits. He read the documents like a man reading a menu he plans to pay for. Then he stood, which made the room smaller. "If what you're saying is true," he said, voice even and careful, "we don't need more speeches. We need repair." He announced, in a way that felt like law and mercy, that he would fund an independent audit of Elena's foundation and immediately underwrite a community trust to ensure that projects like ours would not be held hostage to accounting games again. He spoke of oversight and donors' responsibility, not vengeance. That is the part people like to call deus ex machina. The billionaire appears, the tower of cruelty trembles. But Mr. Whitaker's action was not miracle so much as leverage. He had been quietly looking for projects with real outcomes. He'd once been fed by someone who handed him a hot sandwich in a moment when he needed more than a speech. He had eyes for people who did repair rather than parade virtue. The aftermath was messy and real. Elena stepped down from the board. There were hearings and apologies that did not fit neatly into the back-page columns. The foundation released corrected accounts and made restitution where it could. The trust Mr. Whitaker funded covered payroll gaps and stabilized programs while independent oversight was put in place. Some donors felt betrayed. Some rallied. The people who mattered, the parents who came for tutoring, the students who relied on free evening meals, kept coming. Their lives do not pause for romance. I felt vindicated in a way that had the taste of antiseptic. Necessary, clean, a little sterile. There were nights I cried leaving the bakery. Not for the money or the spotlight, but because the place where I poured my days had become a site of public conflict. I slept fewer hours and taught more lessons on budgeting, not because I love spreadsheets but because I wanted every small organizer to know how to make their work obvious and auditable. Years later, the luncheon is a story people tell as if it were a parable. Elena volunteers quietly now, and she visits the literacy center with a smaller smile. Mr. Whitaker's trust still funds small practical acts across the city. His name is said with an odd mixture of gratitude and the kind of suspicion that keeps us all honest. My bakery is still there, humming with people who read and eat and argue about the best way to fold pastry. I teach a monthly class on community finance and stewardship. Not revenge, but prevention. If there is a single thing I want to leave you with, it is this. Comeuppance can be public and poetic, but the real work is quieter. Evidence gathered, allies chosen, and repair planned. The richest endings are not the ones that humiliate forever. They are the ones that restore the work of the day. The roof fixed, the soup warm, a child's hand steady with a pen.